Hello, everybody. I think we're getting ready to start, so I'm going to start things off. My name is Michael Griffo. I am an agent at ICM Partners, which is one of the largest talent agencies in the country. And I specifically represent theatrical designers. So the men and women who design sets, costumes, lighting, sound, projections for all of the theater that you see, opera, ballet, even some symphonies, all throughout the world, Broadway, off-Broadway, West End, internationally, regionally. And thanks to Camp Broadway at this stage and streamable learning, we are bringing you these digital classrooms so you can have some theater in your life as we're all working from home and studying from home and going to school from home. So today, our guest my very special guest is my client, Paul Tate dePoo III, who is a set designer. And he has designed, operas, plays, musicals, all throughout the country, actually. He has Turandot. He's working on that at Vienna at the moment. He's done regional theater, pretty much every theater you can imagine. And one of the very exciting things that he's working on right now is the pre-Broadway production of War of the Roses, which you don't even know what that is, but it's an old movie with Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. You can Google it later. And it's going to be in a Algonquin Playhouse. His set is stunning, and that's hopefully going to be coming to Broadway. So, Paul, are you there?
Hi.
There you are. Welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Excited to talk to everybody. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want. We're going to start off by showing you a little video of the work that I've done around the world over the past few years. And take some notes as you watch it or ask some questions, and we'll hopefully get to as many as possible.
Get ready. It's going to knock your socks off.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go right ahead. We'll start right in with that.
Okay. Share my audio.
There we go. I hear it.
Great. Can you see it?
I can't see it at the moment. You have to share it.
Hold on. Real quick.
But if we're having a little trouble with that, why don't we hold that button for, oh, there we go. Okay.
A little
Woo!
more.
Amazing. That's now before we get into it, I just have to unpack it a little bit to share with everybody. This is a culmination of I don't know, I didn't exactly know how many years of work, but what's amazing about what you just saw, not only was it all of Paul's work, but he put all of that together as well. And one of the things that I always tell students and people who are working in this industry, it's not good enough just to be a good designer. You have to be a good business person and a salesperson as well. And what he put together there is just an amazing example of how to take all of your work and make it just a little bit of a calling card so everybody could see what you do. It's very important to be able to do that. It takes a long time to be able to have that scope of work. So let's go back a little bit because we have a couple people who are calling in and listening from grade school. So Paul, I want you to give us a little bit of your educational trajectory. Just tell us a little bit about your grammar school, high school, whatever, onto college, and specifically point out when did you know you wanted to be a designer, and what did you do once you knew that academically to help you reach your goal?
So I'm from Key West, Florida, which is a very small island at the very tip of Florida, right next to Cuba, and it's 2 miles by 4 miles. And basically, I grew up with not very large theater around, just from our location. And for my birthday, my parents would take me to Ringling Brothers, the circus, and to
Right, because they're located down there, right?
Yeah.
Or nearby.
In Miami, 3 hours away, I would see either the magician, David Copperfield, or the circus. And my trajectory in high school, I really thought that I was going to be the next David Copperfield and do very large illusion magic shows. And the story is that I had a show being done and Hurricane Wilma came and flooded the theater. And immediately I looked at my parents and said, I think what I love about what I do, and this was in high school, started in middle school with these big magic shows, is the creation of a production. It wasn't necessarily being on the stage, even though I really did enjoy that. But my part was creating these worlds that could change style, it could change what it is, whether that's an opera, or musical, or circus. And then that led me to ultimately Boston University, where they had a very large, scale theater program where I basically trained as an architect. I tell people it's an architect with an entertainment background. And
so you were accepted at BU as an architect student?
Production design and engineering is the program. But I tell people that it's sort of the curriculum as an architect. And in high school, I really didn't build many stage sets. We would have big productions that I would perform in. And sometimes we would build these big homecoming floats for the community in our high school.
Oh, okay.
So I had an interesting background where I really didn't grow up seeing a lot of theater, again, just because we weren't in the tri-state area or
right. But what you were doing is something really important. You were using the resources you had in order to explore your artistry, your creativity. So it really doesn't matter if you don't grow up in New York or Chicago, LA or something. You could use your community. You could use your community theater if there is one, or just your community, like you said, to build floats and get some experience. So when you're in college, was there a moment that flipped the switch where you went from being architect or I'm not maybe sure what I want to do to set designer?
I originally signed up for technical direction, which is actually the construction of the design. And the professors quickly told me, I think your mindset is more the design side, which I never really imagined. I didn't know the terminology of it. And I can admit that I by no means would have been good at the technical side of it, of constructing it. I have an
Right.
engineering, I think, engineering wise from growing up doing Legos and erector sets and building my own thing. So I have like that mentality. But
Right.
when the first design class we ever had to start signing up for were arts sketching, like drawing classes. And I was shocked by that. I was like, wait, why do we have to take, which is crazy to say that now.
Well, yeah.
I didn't know exactly what that was.
Were you good at it?
No, I mean, I didn't really take many art classes in grade school, and
Right.
I found my own vocabulary of how to get my ideas in my mind to what you see in that video, which takes years. And
Right.
I basically taught myself Photoshop, which is a tool that I am grateful for because I use it every single day. And that's the way that I can really tell a director and tell these teams of people that I work with around the world what I'm envisioning in my crazy mind, because it's changing constantly from show to show of what they look like.
So you brought up a really good point, because every set designer has to ultimately do the same thing, but they get to it in different ways. So there are set designers who do their own drafting and are very skilled in that. But if you could just break it down, and I don't even know if you can, who works on your team and how do you incorporate, because you use a lot of computer technology stuff, don't you, in creating your designs?
Yeah.
Just to give the younger kids, even the high school kids, who are probably so adept at all of this, what kind of skills should they be brushing up on if they want to have this type of career?
I'll tell you the big scope of a process in a fast way. I meet with a director asks me to be part of a project, and we sit down and we talk about what the story is, regardless of what the show, even if it's an opera play, it's the same conversation of what does the world want to be. We start with research. We make basically our own digital library or even physical library by going to the library and looking at endless architectural books and history books. There's a huge art history component to all of this, so just having a knowledge of what has happened in the past and architectural styles. And we just make a research chapter in the process. And from then we go to sketching, and that can be from very, very doodle style napkin sketches, we call them.
I can do those.
Yeah. And that then goes to, sometimes it's me sitting in that first meeting with the director. If I have an idea, I just say, what if we do this? And we make like a quick collage on Photoshop. And I like to say, squint your eyes so you can just sort of imagine where I'm going. And sometimes the directors totally get what I'm talking about. And then that launches into a more technical mindset where I love laying out the design and a plan, like how does it all fit in a theater? And what a lot of people don't really realize is how small even a Broadway theater is compared to some of the stages.
Yeah, you should explain that a little bit. If you have just some measurements, it is fascinating how small the actual stage of a Broadway theater is, as opposed to a large regional production or even an opera, because opera's stages are huge.
Yeah, I mean, my high school in Key West, the stage there was probably twice the size of a Broadway theater. And that doesn't mean that it was equipped with the technology that a Broadway theater has. The size of it is really big. So we have to, the first thing is we could have as big of ideas as we want. As Michael mentioned, I'm doing Turandot in Vienna, which is one of the world's largest theaters. It's outside, and it's that's a scale that anything is possible. But when we're doing a play or musical, it's in a very teeny little theater that we have to figure out how to put all of these ideas and make them real without you know.
And so that's a really interesting point for everybody too. I don't know if you remember from the montage that Paul put up, that huge, what looked like a city is actually the Torrendot set.
Yeah.
So there are some times when you're working on a massive scale. I mean, we have some clients who worked on the Sochi Olympics opening ceremony. And then, but you also need to be adept at doing what Paul does as well, with a really small theater, really small budget, to do maybe a 2-character play, but still create magic on the stage.
Exactly. And that takes a huge team to make any of those scales a reality. And the team that is with me in my office in the studio in New York, I have draftsmen that will take the idea and they basically become the architect and create plans that are very detailed so that somebody can then build them. And then we have model makers, and a lot of footage what you saw in that video are models. So they're very small. In Europe, they call them maquettes, and their scale, I say this big, but the Turandot is...
It's huge. It's huge. And what do you call them? What did you say they're called in New York?
In America, we call them scale models, but in Europe, they're called maquettes, and make huge...
Maquettes. I like that better.
Yeah,
just
it's
saying.
very nice. So, and then, you know, we paint things in the studio. A lot of it is computerized, but what I love about what I do is we can do something very computerized and digital and virtual reality, but then we can also make something that's physical so that we can then send that model to a shop so that painters can paint it, because then once it gets into a shop, there are hundreds of people that are dealing with the furniture, they're dealing with the fabrics, the painting, the dyeing. It's an endless process until...
Yeah, it's a huge amount of people. And one of the things as well that I wanted to touch on, if you can just rattle off some of the different types of jobs that, because not everybody, you know, wants to be a set designer. Not everybody has the capacity for it. Some people are just a little more specific and technical. If you just break down a few of the other jobs that are available to people who are interested in working in the theater, in the set design world, but they aren't the set designer or the assistant.
Yeah, there's you know, there's handfuls of people that are sitting behind a computer that are really technically taking our draftings, because when we create, you know, 30 pages of drafting, that's really just the designer's interpretation of it, and it's not necessarily the engineering drawings that are going to keep it standing up. So there are people in a technical office that take that and make 3D models and much more complicated, you know, details to get it built. So that's one entity of it. There's also a props department, and that they're in charge of every sort of furniture piece. They are in charge of every single thing an actor holds on stage. So it's stuff that we don't even really think about as an audience member.
No, and in fact, Paul, that's something I just learned last week. I assumed that like a purse or a backpack that an actor would wear would be the costume designer's world, but it's not. It's your world.
It's props.
I didn't know that. All right, sorry, go on.
No, but we have to have a constant communication with the costume designers and costume departments and lighting designers and the technicians that support the lighting designers, which are electricians. And then, you know, I'm talking every day to painters around the world of how is it being painted? They take my model, and then they take their own artistic freedom and create something on the real life scale.
Right.
So they have to ensure that I trust them to create that vision, and it's a back and forth conversation until opening night.
Yeah, because a lot of those backdrops, so when you go to the theater and you see these gorgeous backdrops, they're typically hand painted, aren't they? At some point, in the beginning at least.
Yeah, now we do a lot of, it's either hand painted, which some of the most incredible artists I've ever met paint.
Right.
These scenery, not only the backdrops, but the floors and the interiors and the landscapes. But sometimes what we also rely on is really large scale printers to get, and it depends on what's the style that we want to showcase to the audience.
Right.
So it can be digital, which then the digital usually goes to a paint shop so that the painter incorporates it in some way. So they're painting on top of the big print. It changes.
So what I'm hearing for anybody who really wants to go into this area, it really is a blending of digital technology, but old-fashioned artistry.
Yeah.
You need to know a little. You're probably not the master of everything, of course, you can't be, but you need to know a little bit about so many different things in order to reach out to the right people, first of all, and to be able to express what you want to those people.
And that knowledge comes with time. Like there's no way that I ever started my career. I was an assistant to my professors in college, and then I was Derek McLean's assistant for 3 years, and Derek most recently did Moulin Rouge. He's done the Oscars for over 5 years. He's working on the new Michael Jackson musical. So I was his assistant and saw his process, and then I went on my own in 2012. So what we're looking at database is 8 years of a catalog of work that I've done. So, but by no means did I have that knowledge when I.
No, there's no way that anybody could, and that's something that's really important. Where it really is building blocks. One of the most important, I think, one of the most important relationships that any designer can have, and growing, being an assistant, is with that designer. Because he or she is your mentor, and then almost like a networking, because that's how you get the jobs moving forward.
Exactly.
Right. So tell them a little bit about, because somebody had asked what I do and how do I find clients, and then what I do for them. And in a nutshell, I find clients in a whole bunch of different ways. Somebody could recommend somebody to me. I could see a show and think, wow, that set design, that lighting design is pretty sensational, or just speaks to the narrative and I really like it. And I might, if I don't know the person, I may look into what else they did, blah, 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 track them for a little bit. But once I get the person, when you represent a designer, it's not like representing an actor, where when you represent an actor, you're counting, you're doing like phone calls, get my client a job, blah, blah, blah. It's much more proactive. With designers, unfortunately, they're doing a lot of the legwork, because a director the director always chooses their design team. So what I can do is put names forward if I know that a project is starting early. But by and large, that designer has created a relationship with the director, or has done such good work the director wants to work with that designer. And my job is to negotiate the best deal possible. But what are some tips, if there are any tips really, on how, when you're climbing up the ladder, how do you get known by the directors who are big or coming up that you want to work with? What was your strategy?
It was in 2012 when I had the opportunity to work with a very successful director, Marcia Milgram Dodd. She had just directed Ragtime on Broadway and got a Tony nomination for that. And that was the first person that ever hired me professionally to do Hello Dolly. And I used that as an opportunity to say, hey, I'm new to this community. I just worked with Marcia. She was very well known at that moment. And I used that even as leverage to get my career slowly moving and moving and moving. And then really just reaching out and sending, saving, I think the biggest thing is you have to save every bit of work. Like I saved every little scribble and photo. And if you start, because speaking from experience, when you go back and you start to try to organize it, it's overwhelming.
No, you got to do it. I always say that one of the most important things is to have a website. You have a great website. Paul, is it PaulDePoo.com? PaulTateDePoo.com.
Yeah, just Paul DePoo or Tate Design
Paul,
Group.
sorry, PaulDePoo.com. You should check it out because it really is a wonderful example. I actually give it to clients who need a better website or are working on a website as how it should be laid out because it needs to be very clean and clear. So going back for a second, what kind of classes in high school and grammar school do you think would be really beneficial as a foundation for somebody who wants to be a designer?
You know, now seeing what is offered to students in that sort of grade range, it seems like a lot more are being offered. And what I would tell people now is that, you know, Adobe Suite, which is Photoshop, and
Right.
InDesign, which is layouts. I started using Premiere, which is the video editing software, because I also do projection design. And now I see that a lot of high schools offer that.
Wow.
I was not a fan of history in high school, but I would say, you know, art history became one of my favorite classes in college.
Right.
I did not take art classes in high school, and I can't express that enough, that I wasn't naturally born as a painter or a sculptor.
Yeah.
But
And going back to history, I think from what I'm hearing from you and from some other people, regular history, world history, US history is vitally important. For some reason, I think there's like a few specific people who really are a fan of it. I was not. My brother's a history teacher. He's one of those. But when you're creating the world, if it's a period piece, if it's an older piece, you need to know what was happening in the world at that time in order to bring those societal elements, the trends at the time, all of those elements into your work. So I just think even with the more technical classes and the art classes, that regular history, and if you don't have a great class at school, just do it on your own, you know.
And it's fun.
Google.
To think of it is in like now it's fun for me because I'm applying it to a project. You know, where this history is like a big broad scope, that did not interest me at all.
Right.
If you think of it as like a specific, if you even, you know, put yourself to how could I design for this part of history, then I think that there's an excitement to it that could open up.
Yeah, that's a good example of how to incorporate it into your just your regular, your own personal curriculum.
Right. And I even noticed that in elementary schools, what they're offering now classes, they're teaching is 3D classes for 3D printing, because 3D printing is becoming an element in every industry, not just theater, obviously, but medical,
right,
interiors, mechanics. Like, I think having that knowledge of 3D printing and designing, I see it offered all over the U.S. So
I know I've seen a 3D printer. I'm not really sure I grasp it. So, two questions for you. Is there, because not everybody's going to have a 3D printer, but most people have Legos, which I loved, and you said you loved.
Yeah.
You know, is it just using the Legos? Like, how can you use that as a tool, as more than just a plaything? How do you use Legos as a tool?
I always tried to, I was fascinated by fair rides, like carnival rides. So I would go home.
Oh, sorry, that's my bird clock, if that's making noise.
I would take photos of fair rides, take them home, and then rebuild, you know, rides out of Connects and Legos to try to, you know, match.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So take a photo of something you love, and get your Legos, don't design what they were made for, and just try to, you know, replicate what you've seen, what you love in a Lego. I love it. Here's a question, and I love it. It's Abigail from Alabama, which sounds like it's a song from like Oklahoma or something. How do you decide what to design for the set? So, you touched on it a little bit, but tell us, like, what do you do when you first start? Because a lot of people think that you design a set before, but that doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, if I'm doing, let's say, The Sound of Music, for instance, I love to look back and see what people have done, because I'm not interested in trying to copy or replicate a past production has done, even though it could be beautiful. But it's fun to try to think, how do we do it differently? So I make a list. The first thing you should do is I make a list, and at the top of that list, it tells me when is the time period and where are the locations that we're going. And I let that sit in my mind for a few weeks sometimes, and then it just sort of worked its way around. And I'm like, well, how could this be? Because a lot about what I do is, how do you go from the interior of a home to the outside to the park, et cetera. So
the transitions of scenes,
And I have this mind where I just try to start plugging in, how does it all work, and how can it be as smooth as possible, just so we're not, curtain comes down and then bring out a new set. Like I love the visual candy of the audience seeing it all change on stage. So that's the first thing, is what is the list, and then what is the style that I want to take it to. And hearing the director say, I don't need to have paintings on the walls. Great, I write that down, I make notes, and then I start to analyze what does all these comments and notes mean, and little by little it starts to develop.
So it's interesting. A lot of people think in some of these questions and previous questions, the art comes first, and it really is that the research comes first, your conversation with the director and what the director's vision is, and then how does the narrative need to be told? What is it telling you about the time, about this particular play or musical that you're working on? Art and the design.
Well, you cut out a bit, Michael.
Paul, did I lose you?
I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Somebody was calling me and I had to decline. I was just saying that the art really stems from your conversation with the director, then what the narrative tells you about the place and time and the necessities of the narrative, and then from all of that information and the research you've done, then the design and the artistic element sort of grows out of that. It doesn't come out of nowhere.
Right. And sometimes I have like an idea at the beginning, and I have to be careful to not let that first idea take over that thought process. But sometimes I go back to the original idea, and sometimes the first idea is the right idea. It's not common at all. But
interesting.
Yeah.
So here's a question we ask everybody. Camp Broadway has sort of, their motto is develop your character. So how would you define character? How do you approach it?
Here, I think it's about being yourself, and over time, my character is developed where I am the person that still made magic shows in high school, and don't suppress that, and be who you are. My character changes, I think, if we're relating it to design. Obviously, every single time that I do a project, I look at it and I say, it's weird that that's me, because it's maybe not my style to do, a 1980s home interior or whatever. But you have to embrace who you are.
Don't make fun of the 80s.
It can be a stuffy interior of a home to like a really fun.
Oh, I'm losing you a little bit.
And so I think character you just have to embrace the character that you are, and then apply it to what you're designing, and cool. how you interact with the different personalities that I get to deal with every day. And for project, everyone's different. As long as you stay the character that you've become, don't try to be somebody else because it's not fun.
I think that's great advice. Do you have any, kind of a loaded question, I think I know the answer. Do you have a preference though, plays, musicals, operas? Is there anything that you like a little bit more, or is it all just magic shows at the top and everything else is below that?
You know, before I even went to see David Copperfield or the circus, I was a pianist, and my parents, you know, had me with piano lessons, which I loved.
Didn't know that.
So music has always been a driving force behind anything that I do. So it's sometimes hard to design a play because there's no real music that's incorporated to it.
Right.
For instance, as in that video I did, Murder on the Orient Express, and there was a composer with that, and the composer actually sent me music before I even started the design. And listening to it told me exactly how the show should move. And that sort of changed my opinion about plays, because originally I wasn't so excited about them because they can be, let's say, I think sometimes boring, and I can say that.
Right.
But I love a play that has different chapters of visuals, and but a musical, I think sweeps the audience as well. Opera, but I'm more of a musical content of the music more than opera. But opera is a scale that I am born to do. Like, I love the grandeur.
Right. So when you're asked though to design something really small, so you're doing a very small play, regardless of the budget, one set, how do you excite yourself? What do you have to do?
You know, I'm now able to read a script, and if I feel like it's a powerful piece and it's worthy, it's not necessarily that it's fun, but does it excite me to tell this story to
right?
And that comes with time as well, because in the beginning I would do, you know, whatever I was given, and now what excites me is if it's something that has a true, profound, you know, heart of a meaning, then I can apply that, and because sometimes what I do, sometimes an audience walks in, and if you said, "Oh, this is Paul, the set designer," they would look at the stage and say, "What set?"
Right. Everybody thinks it's supposed to be this big, you know, monumental thing, and that's not what it always needs to be.
And sometimes I take the background of it, and I'm more there to facilitate space with the director to tell that story with no set. That's, you know, sometimes it's could be 20 picnic tables on an empty stage, and because I love.
That's really an important thing as well for everybody to hear. Not everything has to be a spectacle. Not everything has to make you go, "Oh my God, that's amazing." Set design is there to support the script. And sometimes it just needs to be an empty space with maybe some shades of color, with a chair, and that's your set. But if it's supporting the narrative and the script, it's done its job. And that's a really important distinction. I think you probably don't make that until you get a little bit older and learn a little bit more about theater, I think. So it comes. Any parting words for our school audience? Because I think we got to wrap this thing up. Time flies.
No, just enjoy every chapter of the school and learn as much as you can artistically if you're interested in design at the upfront, and just know that there will not be a full, you know, knowledge package at the beginning of it.
Right.
And no one has the answers, and it takes time and experience to develop the character and your stability to create what you saw that little video on. And it's growing for me every day, so it's a never-ending learning process.
Yeah, you're continuing to learn. That's wonderful, and thank you everybody who
and one last
came
thing.
in from all parts of the world.
And
wherever you might have been from. Like I said, Alabama was my little special favorite for this one, but you're all great. Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you. There's some online courses that are that everyone should, while people are home, you can learn whatever you want at home. So if you're interested in any of the things that I said, watch some YouTube videos. And I've even been teaching myself some classes while everyone's, at home.
Oh, that's great.
So.
And you can find those at YouTube, just like learn how to design a set. Are there any schools that do this specifically?
Yeah, I've gone on YouTube to teach me some programs that, like the Adobe video software, and there's some free tutorials just to, free downloads. So take advantage.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, take advantage of this downtime while you're there, because a lot of what Paul has done and other designers really is outside the classroom. So use that time. I think that's a great little piece of advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any. I think our time is done. I want to thank everybody, if they can still hear me, for tuning in. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.